Have you ever lost a pet and then while you were mourning had another animal show up? And did you think that maybe that other animal was your beloved pet coming back as a sign or something, maybe to say goodbye? I think you could have been right about that. I want to explain why, and I want to give you a couple stories that, though anecdotal, definitely reinforce the idea. Losing a pet can be a truly prolific, traumatic milestone event in a person's life, but maybe there's some hope. Let's discuss. So, animal souls. There's a lot to say about animals and how they pertain to death and destruction, from animal cults to animals in mythology to a million other things. But we're going to stay focused strictly on this idea of one animal going on to basically possess another after they die. To do this, we need to first figure out how the animal soul works, which, as you'll see, isn't really that different from people, I don't think, because what it really comes down to is learned levels of consciousness and the ability to remain absolutely in the moment. In my earlier video about Dolores Cannon's book, Life After Death, I talked briefly about how the souls she supposedly spoke to said essentially that animals largely share a collective soul, which can eventually become individualized in animals that end up being domesticated, and better aligned with their, with human customs that are around them. This seems to be a common idea within a lot of metaphysical theory on animals, though the evolution through domestication is a little bit rarer to hear about. But the collective soul part is big. That animals would share the existence between them more freely and more expressly than humans do, and that humans are more individualized and separated from each other. Most people who talk about these things might also tell you that the reason humans are more individualized is because we aren't as in touch with the flow of the present moment. Yet, animals can become more individualized and can become more separated from each other as well, again, through domestication and maybe other ways. It seems that there might be certain benchmarks that are shared between animal and human, maybe shared between everybody, benchmarks of consciousness, and maybe those have already been figured out in something called the 8-circuit model of consciousness. The 8-circuit model of consciousness is a holistic model created by Dr. Timothy Leary, and later refined by Robert Anton Wilson. Wilson basically refined the idea in his books, The Cosmic Trigger, and a personal favorite of mine, Prometheus Rising. Fantastic book. The Leary and Wilson models are similar, but we're going to talk about the Wilson model because I just think it's more direct and more reined in. It's an improvement on the Leary model. And we're actually only going to discuss the first 4 circuits because those are the ones pertinent to the evolution of animals, and also because I would like to eventually dedicate an entire video to working through the full model. So the 8-circuit model of consciousness essentially asserts that once someone is born, they begin to have life experiences that activate a series of circuits or connections within their nervous system. There are 8 such circuits, obviously, and the last 4 are very much tied to recognition of a collective soul and communication with astral or celestial entities. So basically, the first 4 circuits, as we'll discuss, move us toward individualization, and the last 4 move us back toward collectivism. Or we could say that the first 4 move us away from the etheric into the physical, and the last 4 move us from the physical back to the etheric. And for all we know, those later circuits may trigger ahead of what we consider the first 4 circuits in non-human species. Who knows? But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's just look at the first 4 and flesh this out. The first circuit is called the biosurvival circuit or the oral biosurvival circuit. This circuit is basically formed right out of the womb when the subject first understands the mother as a source of nurturing sustenance versus the external world that is not the same safety or feeling. This applies certainly to humans and mammals at large, but in other animals where the mother does not necessarily stick around or nurture, she can be replaced with the safety of the nest or even the egg. It's the difference between what you know is safe and good and warm and everything else that's not. The second circuit is the emotional circuit, or the anal emotional territorial circuit, more precisely. This one is formed when the subject learns to compete for territory in some way. Many think this is often first formed in humans and other mammals with the realization of the father as some detached or even competitive entity from itself. So the father is not involved in the womb or the milk of the mother and might even be intuited by the child to be trying to possess the body of the mother as the first territory. And again, the father may not stick around, in which case, if it isn't a territorial battle with him, then it's going to be some other creature at some other point. It's the difference between what you know as a dominant behavior and a cooperative behavior. So I'll assert that most, if not all, animals above a certain level of cellular function can and do activate or bridge those first two circuits. But it's the third one here where things begin to split. The third circuit is the time-binding semantic circuit, and this one is formed as we come to recognize and embed common symbols into our existences. This is where we understand the fundamentals of ones and zeros, yes or no, either or, this means that. Now, animals usually have some kind of language, usually. They can make utterances of warnings or pleasure. So there's some essential development in that circuit. And I think baked into most animals, really. But consider how many symbols there are in our lives, how many things mean other things. If a dog or a cat lives with you in your home, then your own symbols are pressed upon them through osmosis, if not direct action. If you spray the cat with water in a spray bottle every time she jumps on the counter, she will ideally come to understand the spray bottle as a weapon of authority. If your dog sees you packing your bags every time you go out of town and leave him with a babysitter, he will likely grow saddened by your packing after coming to grasp what that means. The act of packing bags is a symbol of your absence. A cow will perceive the engine of a food truck to be a symbol that she will soon feast on food. As we decrease the space between our lives and those of our domesticated pets, we infiltrate their consciousness with more and more of our symbols, aligning their understandings of physical reality with our own understandings. The fourth circuit, and the last we'll speak of in this video, is the social sexual circuit, or as he states it in Prometheus Rising, the moral socio-sexual circuit. This circuit is formed by our senses of shame as impressed upon us by the world around us, as impressed upon us by our communities. This is where we come to understand the idea of what we wish to do versus what our communities expect us to do. So this is where we begin to look inward upon ourselves and our actions, and with the idea of regret that is born of shame, we also turn more toward considerations of the past and the future, really establishing more firmly a concept of time. If your brand new puppy shits on your couch and you put his nose close to it and you forcefully say no, he will likely feel shamed and he will think twice about shitting on the couch in the future. When there is shame, your options collapse down into time tunnels that reflect forward and backward on the cause of that shame. You're stopped in your tracks. You come to know better, and so does your puppy. So, to review, we get the first two circuits pretty much whether we like it or not. The third can be more or less developed in animals, and the fourth impresses the idea of shame and subsequently time upon animals who did not know it before. And technically, it's the third circuit that starts to impress time through symbols, which put us in patterns of repetition outside of what we normally know. But in the most extreme way, it's the fourth circuit that really hits time home, hits temporal concepts home. So to clarify, wild animals tend to develop one or two less circuits than domesticated ones. The domesticated animals are in between the wild ones and humans, if they're not possibly even closer to the human consciousness at that point. Now consider that animals do not see death as an end. The formation of a fourth circuit, though hammering down a realization of time, does not intrinsically also hammer down a realization of death. Death cannot be adequately discussed with a bird or a fish or a cat because there's no adequate language for it. So when an animal dies, domesticated or not, they don't have any reason to actually experience an end. To them, this is only a movement. And of course, this is assuming the consciousness survives at all for any of us. But on this channel, we assume it does, and there's going to be a bajillion videos between now and then as to why. So, okay, I think this is what you're actually waiting for now. Animal possessions. And I'm specifically saying animal possessions, as opposed to animal reincarnations. Animal possessions are pretty direct and quick and ultimately detached. A reincarnation is a different thing that kind of forms a being over time, as opposed to a possession that abruptly and for only a short time takes over and presumably exits an impressionable soul or an impressionable vehicle. Let's say you have the unfortunate and miserable experience of a beloved domesticated animal pass away. In your human understanding, you will very likely see that animal in other animals. You will see that animal in wild animals that come into your proximity. Cardinals are a real big one. Many people will see a cardinal visitation as a returned pet or even a person. And honestly, there's not really a reason to leave people out of this. A person's no less domesticated in a home than their pet. And even though they have a death concept, they also have expandable understandings. But sticking with animals here, because that's what this video is about, do you know about the Apis bull? Have you heard about that guy? So back in the 4th century, before Christianity said no, there was this sacred bull called the Apis bull. And it was worshipped in Egypt, where they pegged this bull as the son of the goddess Hathor. So already an individualized soul, broken off of the collective by sheer recognition of identity. And they would basically always keep some supposed version of this bull alive. And not only that, but they would actively program it to be the deity they all believed it was. And yes, I'm telling you that they believe this particular bull held a particular spirit, and when it died, they would seek a new bull with similar markings to replace it as that spirit's vessel. When the old bull died, they would mummify it and bury it in a rock tomb with much reverence before actively educating the new bull to be the same as the old bull. They would literally educate each new bull for a period of 4 months, teaching it about who they believed it to be. Again, impressing those 3rd and 4th circuit expectations on an otherwise blank soul. So, in the case of the Apis bull, people are saying, come on, here's your vessel, stick around. And in the case of cardinals, and I don't know, rabbits or bears or bees or whatever other animal we witness and intuit as our deceased beloved, the animal is then approaching us and saying, hey, I'm in a new vessel and I'm just checking in. So why can they do this? Well, it's because they formed enough circuits during their lives to come to understand and assimilate with the environment they spent that life in. With no way to truly realize their own death as an end, but rather a point along a further journey, their consciousness that remains when the body is no longer functional will, I assume, very often seek a way to make another pass or two before moving on. If your heart is hurting, they may very well read those symbols and still feel the temporal obligation to react to them, checking in to settle the past before moving to its rightful place in the future. They may float around as little ghosts watching you cry, but as with any ghost, it's doubtful they can be very effective or able to refine the situation in any way without some physical body. They will know the physical body, as we do, to be a method and an instrument of contact, and so they will seek a new one, albeit temporary. Now, as discussed in my prior video about the purpose of life, animal bodies, just like human bodies, are exoskeletal vehicles for our souls, or the ectoplasm that drives them. So, when an animal soul with strong third and fourth circuit programming needs a new vehicle, where else would they look but to those running on only the two most base circuits? There are basically blank vehicles being powered strictly by fight or flight, with no grander temporal agenda. That energy that runs through them is only reactive based on the most elementary and almost involuntary programming. And so, the experienced, more refined soul without a body need only move into that flow and then use it to manipulate the vehicle that the flow is passing through. So, to be absolutely clear, the vehicle is the body of the animal that the deceased possesses. So, all this might make you feel a little better, I hope, if you're dealing with this. But grief may still have you asking, why do they leave again once they've returned? There's a lot that could be said here about that, but I'll try to keep it short and sweet. While a soul can jump into the body of a second circuit organism, it can also jump out since it was never under any impression that it was ever exactly one with it. It was a utilitarian move and not an identity. It was the path that it took to get to the moment it shared with you. And frankly, inhabiting a body that they didn't just come out of may be a little weird for them. In the stories I'll tell at the end of this video, you'll see that these possessed animals would come close, but not all the way. And this could also be part of that fourth circuit programming in them as well. The idea that some higher expectation compels them away from the vehicle. You can drive your car to the beach, but you'd stop before the water. So in any case, the common thought gathered from near-death experiences is that the deceased clearly understand the life force of the universe to be everlasting and infinite, that we are in fact separated by our bodies, and that discorporation only breaks the illusion. People may feel the emotions of their worried family members as they're dying on an operating table. And they may also try themselves to rectify those emotions. But this is usually as brief as any comparable pet visitation. The bottom line in these instances is that though their loved ones may worry, the movement into the non-physical field is as necessary and warm as the understanding that those loved ones are on the same path with you. So, that is to say that your pets never leave you, nor does any deceased, but rather enmesh with your frequency beyond temporal reality. Their physical visitation after death through a possessed vehicle is either something of a formality or a curiosity. So I feel like I've had a lot of unique and meaningful animal encounters in my life, but there are two that if you believe them, seem to be exceedingly strong evidence of the kind of possession we're talking about here. So I'm going to cover them chronologically as they occurred. The first was Bella, a beautiful golden retriever who got out under the fence and was hit by a car. Her body is here now. We had 5 other pets at the time, including 2, let's say, polecats that stayed mostly in a big tiered cage, as well as a regular cat and 2 other dogs. There was also a kid in the house, and we were all crying and miserable and out of our heads when Bella died. So this was spring, and we were sitting around sad with the back door open the day after she died. And this was before we even got her in the ground, I think, because we needed a bobcat to do that. We couldn't just get it right away. In any case, we're just sitting there crying, and a gray cat with no collar just walks in the door, just walks in my house and comes in and sits down in the living room with us. None of the other pets were disturbed by it at all. And we just knew it was Bella. In our understanding, it had to have been Bella. She ended up staying the night. We fed her dinner, then a meal in the morning, and then she left as soon as she arrived. Just stayed that one night with us and broke bread with us. It brought us peace, for sure. But then flash forward several months to November of that same year. My partner at the time called me while I was working and explained that it was the Day of the Dead and that we should visit Bella's grave and maybe leave an offering. So this sounded very nice, but I had a few hours left on my shift before I could get home and do that. But then, in that time between the call and me getting off work, that same gray cat returned. This was months later from the original visit, on the day we specifically spoke of Bella and visiting her grave. And on that day, again, months after the first time, she did the exact same thing as before. She walked into the house, ate with us, and then stayed the night and hit the road in the morning. That pretty much sealed the deal on our feelings about that cat. And we never saw her again after that, but we got the peace we needed from that event. The next instance was after the death of my dearly beloved chihuahua, Remy, who died very suddenly for reasons I still cannot grasp. He never had a bad day until he did, and it was the worst. Sick in the morning, dead in the evening, after even 2 trips to his apparently shitty vet. Not the vet I have now for my current dog, by the way. Anyway, his body is here now. And that one hit me really, really, really hard. And I was deeply depressed for a long time and still might be. That might be a permanent depression, that one. That was a 2016 death in a 9-year. That was brutal. That was a brutal year. I spent a lot of time in my head. But then one day, I was in my backyard at his grave, and I saw a cardinal on one of the trees there in the little cemetery. As with many cardinals at this time, I felt him very strongly in this one, which was very red and very present and in close proximity. I watched that bird intently as it flew away from me to high up in a tree that was like across the way, far across the way. But I still had eyes on him, and I felt extremely certain that Remy was in that bird. So I walked up on my back porch, and I just kept staring at the bird in the distance, and it seemed like it was staring at me. That was the feeling that I got. And I basically spoke out loud to the bird, not in a yell, but more like a prayer, saying, "If you're Remy, then fly to me. Please fly to me if you are Remy." And I just stood there, locked in and pleading until it did exactly that. That cardinal from way up in that tree that wasn't even on my property, it was way off in the distance, dropped down and flew right toward me. It swooped by within maybe 3 feet maximum of where I was standing, went past me, and landed right on Remy's grave. Once again, I had no doubt. It was just too strong a coincidence. And once my pleasant surprise turned into abject relief, he disappeared back into more nearby trees. We'll never forget that. So those are my personal stories, which really kind of led me to look more into how these things could be and kind of steered me to what I think is a better understanding of the animal soul. And I'll say that if you don't experience anything like this yourself in the wake of a similar tragedy, don't fret. It doesn't happen so explicit in every case. Plus, I can tell you way more stories of pets making supernatural post-death visits without using another animal's body. That's the majority, really. And that's really almost a given, too. Hearing them walk down the hall, smelling their scent. I've even had Remy visit in the form of little weird dancing lights that my partner and I could both see right in front of us and were talking about while it was happening. But those are other stories, and obviously we're only focusing on the possession concept in this video. But just know that when something dies and the essence leaves the body, its potential at that point is endless. It's endless. They'll always be around in some electromagnetic and or non-temporal form. And if they do possess another animal to see what's shaken, then that's just one of many, many, many types of communions you can actually have with them. That's just one of many, many types of communications that they can make with you. By the way, I do think speaking of them helps to call their energy back to you for what it's worth. They know their names. Your pets know their names. Anyway, thanks for watching this video. And if you watched it because you're dealing with such heaviness yourself, then I wish you the best. And I hope you'll be ultimately and profoundly enlightened from within your grief. And I hope that if this was not verbose rambling to you, you may have taken something from it that makes your situation feel a little bit better. And you owe me for that. So like and subscribe. Just kidding. Bye.